continuing our sermon series through the book of Joshua this morning. But before we dive into the text and explore what Joshua has in store for us this morning, I thought I'd start off by reading an article that I came across a number of months ago in the Post-Gazette. It's a letter to the editor that I stumbled upon that I just found incredibly powerful and moving, so I thought I'd share it with you this morning. It's written by a woman by the name of Charisse from Squirrel Hill. She writes this. She says, "In a world full of the ravages of war, cutthroat politics, and public servant annihilation, it is so refreshing to be pleasantly reminded of the goodness of human beings, and not at all surprising to find it in Pittsburgh. My daughter and I were walking to dinner at Six Pen Kitchen on March 14th after receiving a free birthday meal coupon. As we waited at a light across the street, I let go of my keys, thinking that I'd hooked them to my purse like I normally do. Instead, I watched as my keys dropped straight down into the sewer grate. The crowd around me saw all this happen and all groaned out loud, just like you did, with me. Immediately, people began making suggestions, such as to get some wire hangers. My daughter ran to the nearby Pittsburgh CLO Academy, and I went across the street to Six Pen, who all gave us wire hangers. A nearby boutique shop gave us a broom handle. A police officer who had stopped took the wire hangers and got tape from the nearby Starbucks and rigged up a long hook with a pole and helped us dig around the sludge water. Other people kept taking turns helping us dig in the muck themselves. A AAA truck driver stopped and tried to help, as did a Department of Public Works crew. For almost 2 hours, this continued. When one person left, another person stopped by to help, although nothing seemed to work. Since every key related to my life was on that keychain, including my car keys, a neighbor kindly said she would come pick us up, but she wouldn't be able to be there for another hour. So since we had time and I still had my coupon, I told my daughter we would just go over and eat like we planned at Six Pen, where the staff had seen the spectacle from their windows and offered their commiseration. When the bill came, I handed over my free meal coupon and the waiter told me to keep it and use it another time as our meal was being comped by the manager. I was tired with a sore back from bending over a sewer grate, but at that point, tears came to my eyes. I thanked the waiter and staff profusely. The next day was no different, when the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority sent employees to the grate to help. They pulled the grate up, and within 20 minutes, they successfully raked up my keys. Though I had brought my own plastic bag, they proceeded to wipe off my keys themselves, put them in their own Ziploc bag, and gave me hand sanitizer and a rag to clean up with. The entire city was at its best over this situation, which was by no means an emergency, but just another small life challenge at best. Even so, as a single mom who moved into the city less than a couple of years ago, I was so glad for my daughter to see that everyone can work together and help each other, even in the quote-unquote big city. It was a life lesson she will not soon forget, and neither will I. Thank you, Pittsburgh." Signed, Charisse. When I read this letter, I instantly knew I had to save it. So I clipped it, put it in my folder, and I knew I wanted to share it because it's one of those letters you read that just reminds you why we love Pittsburgh so much. You know, Pittsburgh is a city that takes care of itself. Pittsburghers are people who, I think, for the most part, generally do like each other. Where, you know, unlike other cities like, you know, that nasty neighbor we have in the east in Philly or like New York or, you know, I knew I was going to get that, or Boston or some other cities, where everyone seems to be at each other's throats and kicking each other to the curb. Pittsburghers, it seems to me, generally speaking, like to stop and help each other out and take care of one another. This letter made me love Pittsburgh even more than I already did before reading it. I love how appreciative Charisse sounds in the letter. She reflects on just how much that meant to her. Something as frustrating as losing a set of keys completely changed her perspective, I believe, of what it meant to live in the city of Pittsburgh. Mostly, though, the reason I saved this letter is because I believe it reflects, in a small way, the beautiful concept we're going to be talking about this morning, a concept called Communitas. Communitas. Communitas is a fancy word. It's a fancy word that's defined by sociologists and the dictionary to describe it, an intense community spirit, the feeling of great social equality, solidarity, and togetherness. Alan Hirsch, who's a well-known missionary, who's a South African missionary to the U.S., who came to the U.S. to do mission work here, he describes Communitas as a Community formed in the context of an ordeal, challenge, task, or mission that requires each player to find each other in a new significant way to get the job done. Communitas, if I were to sum it up quickly and succinctly, is a community forged through a mission in opposition to that mission. Communitas is what a military unit experiences when they go to war together, or when new recruits go to basic training together. They form together a community that is bonded by a united front against whatever is standing to oppose their mission. They are changed forever. They're bonded for life. They are men and women who will always consider themselves brothers or sisters based on their mission and the opposition to that mission. According to her letter, Charisse is not a born and raised Pittsburgher like many of you are, like I am myself. Charisse is a single mom who recently moved to Pittsburgh just a couple years ago. And even after living in Pittsburgh for a couple years, I imagine Charisse probably still felt somewhat like an outsider in our city. I imagine a lot of people do when they move to another location, when they move to another city. They feel, even for an extended period of time, like an outsider looking in, wondering what it's like to be a part of the community, intimately. My guess is the reason that Charisse wrote this letter to the Post-Gazette, this letter to the editor, is because the experience she had on that corner, that six-pen kitchen, probably helped her experience that sense of communitas, that sense of community, of oneness with the greater Pittsburgh community after everyone poured together their efforts to get her keys out of the muck and the mire of the sewer. Communitas is an absolutely vital experience for the overall health and unity of a community, but it's incredibly difficult to achieve. Communitas most often occurs in the face of unexpected danger or opposition. Communitas cannot be achieved artificially. You cannot teach this sense of unity, this sense of oneness within a body, within a family. Communitas requires taking chances. Communitas requires the risk of failure or loss. Like any other worthwhile leader, Joshua desired that his people, the nation of Israel, experience communitas for themselves. He desired that they were one as a nation, that they knew each other as brothers and sisters, no matter how distant they might be related, no matter how distant they might settle in the Promised Land. Joshua wanted Israel to be a united nation, to be one in the eyes of God, and in their own eyes of one another. Last week we began this new teaching series called Conquerors, A Journey into the Heart of the Kingdom, through which we've been working through the book of Joshua. Up to this point in the history of Israel, Israel had spent 400 years as slaves in Egypt. Israel had spent, after 400 years as slaves in Egypt, 40 years wandering through the desert, aimlessly pursuing the promised land that God had assured Moses would be leading them towards. God promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that their descendants would inhabit the land, they would thrive in the land of Canaan. But it seemed as if they'd never experienced the fulfillment of God's promise. The promised land seemed like an unachievable pipe dream for almost 500 years. But then just before his death, Moses led the tribes of Israel to the eastern shores of the Jordan River. And as we read last week, Moses eventually dies, and God commands Joshua to take over the helm of leadership over Israel and to lead Israel, to lead the nation across the river, the Jordan River, finally to enter the promised land for themselves, to finally take and fulfill the promise God had given them generations and generations prior. The time had finally come for Israel to experience the fulfillment of God's promise. The tribes of Israel had already experienced a bit of communitas in their time in Egypt, in their wanderings through the desert. But God had commanded Joshua to lead a new generation of Israelites into the land of Canaan. So this is a new young generation, a generation that hadn't experienced completely that wandering through the desert. This isn't a generation that experienced slavery in Egypt. This is a new generation of Israelites, and Joshua knows he needs to have them all together, united as the 12 tribes of Israel, a cohesive unit in the Promised Land. We pick up the story of Israel's entrance into the Promised Land as Joshua meets with the leaders of each of the 12 tribes. And we're going to begin reading in Joshua 1, verse 10, reading through the end of the chapter. You can follow along on the screen. We'll be reading from the New Living Translation. Joshua then commanded the officers of Israel, "Go through the camp and tell the people to get their provisions ready. In 3 days you will cross the Jordan River and take possession of the land the Lord your God has given you. Then Joshua called together the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. He told them, remember what Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. The Lord your God is giving you a place of rest. He is giving you this land. Your wives, children, and livestock may remain here in the land Moses assigned to you on the eastern side of the Jordan River. But your strong warriors, fully armed, must lead the other tribes across the Jordan to help them conquer their territory. Stay with them until the Lord gives them rest, as He has given you rest, and until they too possess the land the Lord your God is giving them. Only then may you return and settle here on the eastern side of the Jordan River, in the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, assigned you. They answered to Joshua, we will do whatever you command us, and we will go wherever you send us. We will obey you just as we obeyed Moses. And may the Lord your God be with you as He is with Moses. Anyone who rebels against your orders and does not obey your words, and everything you command will be put to death. So be strong and courageous. All of Israel had, at this point, gathered on the eastern shore of the Jordan River. All 12 tribes of Israel were there on the eastern side. The entire nation has endured 40 years of wandering through the desert, and they've finally come to the place in which they are resting on the eastern shore of the river, and they can see the promised land across the way. They can see it. It's there. They know where it is. All of Israel was eager to get into the promised land. All of them were eager to cross the Jordan River. All of them except for 2.5 tribes. 2.5 tribes had already settled in the land that God had promised them. After a lifetime of wandering, Moses finally settled the Israelites on the eastern shore of the Jordan, and while they were there, the leaders of the 3 tribes on the eastern side of the Jordan, as you can see them on the map here, the eastern side of Manasseh, the tribe of Gad, and the tribe of Reuben. The leaders of these tribes approached Moses, as recorded in Numbers chapter 32, and said, we have a ton of livestock. We have a vast number of livestock, and we've noticed that the land here on the eastern side of the Jordan is really good for them. It's suitable for raising these livestock. Would it be possible for us to just stay here, rather than crossing the Jordan with the rest of Israel? And Moses, being a fantastic leader as he was, and being inspired by God, as we know, understood that that could be all right, that could work for them. But his fear was that if he didn't command them to move with the rest of Israel into the western side of the Jordan, that there would be disunity, a natural disunity between the tribes on the eastern side and the tribes on the western side. And so Moses, followed up again by Joshua, commands that the warriors of the eastern tribes, the Manasseh, half-tribe Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben, that they move across the Jordan River with the rest of Israel. Not because he was afraid that they wouldn't be able to conquer the land of Canaan without those warriors, without those tribes, but because he was afraid of disunity. He was afraid of them fracturing because of the natural boundaries between them. As a matter of fact, God had made a habit at this point of winning victories, military victories, with as few people as possible. So Joshua could very well have been tempted to say, oh yeah, just you guys stay here on the eastern side. God will do what he wants to do with the western tribes, and we'll win our fight alone. Because God, a God of miracles, he takes care of the smaller people, he takes care of Israel, and so he'll surely do a miracle and help us have victory over the land of Canaan with just 10.5 tribes, or 9.5 tribes, I should say. Instead, Joshua, being the smart leader that he is, says, no, we need to be a united front. We need to all experience this battle together. And so he sends all 12 tribes into war in the land of Canaan. Joshua wants the entire nation of Israel to experience the Communitas, which would only come by pursuing the mission of God together as an entire nation, as an entire group. As I said before, Communitas is a necessary component for all maturing and healthy relationships. We should all be able to say that we've experienced Communitas in our homes. We should all be able to say, we should all be blessed enough to say that when our family or our household experiences some kind of struggle, experiences some sort of opposition, some sort of strife of some kind, that we have been able to, as a household, as a family, buckle down together and experience and go through that turmoil as a cohesive unit. We should be able to say that when a husband is struggling with something at work, that the wife has him, is with him by his side. that when the teenagers who are in school are dealing with bullies or things like that in high school, they should know that their family in their home has their backs, that they're united, a united front, that they're in this thing together, and they have each other to support one another, that they have this experience of Communitas. And the opposition that you face, the opposition that we struggle through as individuals or as a family, should only strengthen our relationships with one another. It should create a bond between us that cannot be repeated or taught any other way. It should forge among us a united relationship that is unbreakable by anything else this world can throw at us. When we recite our wedding vows, those of us who are married, we say to our spouses that we will promise to love one another through good times and bad, sickness and in health, for richer or for poor. We are committing to one another that we will experience Communitas regardless of what this world throws at us when we recite our vows to one another at the sacrament of marriage, at our wedding day. That relationship should be forged together through thick and thin. The same should be true about the relationships of people involved in the church. As we become members of a church, as we become participants in God's family in the church should be a community marked by this idea of Communitas, that we are forged together through thick and thin. That when opposition comes our way and we pursue the mission of God regardless, our relationship is united even more so than it was beforehand. Today, the traditional American church is not known as being a place of Communitas, just generally speaking. Today, the traditional American church is known as a place of comfort, of feeling good, of ears being tickled, of being told that you're doing everything right and that we're loving you regardless of what you choose to do in life. When a church faces opposition or challenge, when the church steps out of the box and takes risks in pursuing the mission of God, the kingdom of God, many people walk away from it. Many people walk away because it means they can't simply be a pew filler anymore. You can't just relax and enjoy life, enjoy the music, enjoy the message, and go home happy. It means you actually have to get involved. It means that people actually expect something of you, that you're a part of the team, that you're a player in this game called the kingdom of God. And when a church decides to take those steps and pursue the kingdom against all odds and pursue it to its own end, there will be opposition. The world does not want the kingdom of God to succeed. Satan does not want the kingdom of God to grow in this world. This city does not want the kingdom of God. The forces of darkness want to hold it down. They want to hide the light in the darkness. And so when we step out of the box and we go after the kingdom, we pursue the kingdom, and we share the kingdom with the people of this city, with the neighborhoods of our city, there will be things that come our way. There will be opposition. There will be challenge. There will be things thrown against us to make us feel like we've gone too far. We've done too much. And it will make us, many of us will be tempted to simply accommodate the culture, accommodate our city, and just make everyone feel loved. Just make everyone feel welcome. Just make everyone feel at home. And I'm not saying feeling loved and feeling at home is a bad thing. What I'm saying is that those are part of the way in which we pursue mission. We have to pursue the mission of God before we simply just become a place of feeling good, of being comfortable. The church that God created, the church that follows Jesus, is a church marked by Communitas as a result of the mission of the kingdom and the forces which oppose the kingdom. I'm going to repeat that again. I think you need it on the screen. The church that follows Jesus is a church marked by Communitas as a result of the mission of the kingdom and the forces which oppose the kingdom. Jesus understood this concept. He knew it couldn't be taught to his disciples. So in Matthew chapter 10, we have a story in which Jesus sends his disciples out to experience what it means to be a community united through this concept of Communitas. Matthew writes this in Matthew chapter 10, beginning in verse 5. It says, Jesus sent out the 12 apostles with these instructions. Don't go to the Gentiles and the Samaritans, but only to the people of Israel, God's lost sheep. Go and announce to them that the kingdom of heaven is near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cure those with leprosy, and cast out demons. Give as freely as you have received. Don't take any money in your money belts, no gold, silver, or even copper coins. Don't carry a traveler's bag with a change of clothes and sandals or even a walking stick. Don't hesitate to accept hospitality because those who work deserve to be fed. Look, I am sending you out as sheep among wolves. So be as shrewd as snakes and as harmless as doves. But beware, for you will be handed over to the courts, you will be flogged with whips in the synagogues. You will stand trial before governors and kings because you are my followers. But this will be your opportunity to tell the rulers and other unbelievers about me. When you are arrested, don't worry about how to respond or what to say. God will give you the right words at the right time. For it is not you who will be speaking. It will be the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. A brother will betray his brother to death. A father will betray his own child, and children will rebel against their parents and cause them to be killed. And all nations will hate you because you are my followers. But everyone who endures to the end will be saved. If we've been living under a rock for all these years, if we've not noticed, there's a war raging on in this world. There's a war between the kingdom of God and the forces of evil that wish to repel the church and its mission. The persecution of Christians, even in this nation, is becoming more and more of a reality in our own backyards. A few days ago, there was a lot of drama, especially in the military world, because the Pentagon released an official statement that military members found to be sharing their faith with others take upon themselves the risk of being court-martialed. According to a statement made by an official at the Pentagon, a member of the military could be thrown in jail for practicing their faith and reaching out to others, sharing their faith with others. Since then, the Pentagon has made some retractions and they've actually made some changes to their statement. But the truth of the matter is that what they finally decided was that every situation would be handled on a case-by-case basis. That if a commander decides that someone's being a little bit too aggressive with their evangelism, someone's being a little bit too aggressive with sharing their faith, they could be court-martialed or thrown in jail because of it. The article even included to say that if someone were to accuse a chaplain of talking too much about Jesus, he or she could be court-martialed for doing that. If a chaplain was someone complained about a chaplain talking about Jesus too much. I don't want us to think for a second that this kind of opposition, that this kind of persecution is limited merely in the military. This stuff is happening in our world. I'm going off notes there a little bit, but I remember a couple years ago there was a Bible study in California that was being led in Orange County. And the government officials and the police showed up to shut down this Bible study because they were considering a regular meeting of 3 or more people in a household and it had to be stopped. The same thing happened in Florida. I remember reading just a couple months ago a campus house, a campus ministry, was completely shut down out of a college in Florida, a state college in Florida, because they had in their bylaws that in order to be a leader at a campus house, you had to profess Jesus as your Lord. And so they shut it down because they said it was biased and it wasn't open to everybody. This kind of persecution is happening here in our country. We are seeing this growing and growing and growing. And all that this should cause is a re-examination of the church on how it pursues mission in the world around us. This should cause us to re-examine how we do mission in the world around us. We are either going to band together and decide that regardless of cost, regardless of what comes against us, we're going to share Jesus as we've been commanded, or we're going to fall away on the wayside and just accommodate culture and become another social club. That's the options we have right now before us. We either decide we're going to pursue Jesus, His kingdom, to whatever end that means, or we're just going to become a social club who welcomes everybody and believes whatever it wants to believe. We have to decide how we're going to respond. And if we would decide to respond as God would have us to respond, to pursue Jesus to no end, He will do amazing works through us. If you want to know which option God prefers, all you have to do is look at what God is doing through the church in places like Asia, in China, Africa, in the Middle East. God is doing powerful things through the Christian community in places like China, where it is completely oppressed, completely underground. The mission of the kingdom and the opposition to it is forming a powerful and growing Christian communitas in those parts of the world, more so than any other. Because the people are pursuing the mission, and because they're being opposed together as a united front, they are loving each other and becoming united like no other place in the world. And God is moving in mighty and powerful ways. We need to decide if we're going to be on this mission together or if we're not. If we're not committed to the mission, we will never know the kind of power God has in store for us as the church. We will never know what it means to experience this idea of communitas, this united front that is forged through the thick and thin of opposition. When life gets tough, we need to rely on one another. When opposition comes our way, we need to have everybody on the team. Christianity is not something you can do on your own. Christianity is not a solo sport. Christianity is only experienced in communitas, like Joshua helped the Israelites experience, like Jesus helped the disciples experience, and like so many Christians are experiencing around the world now with severe persecution they're enduring. We have to be committed to the mission. We have to decide here and now that we are in this together, or if we're not, just fall off the wayside. Let's go ahead and close up with a word.